Well, today we consider the future of business coaching. Facilitating the knowledge stream is Daryl W. Gurney. Now, he's an executive and a career coach. He's an author, a speaker, a licensed spiritual counselor, and he's an entrepreneur and founder of CareerGuy.com and theback40.com. Welcome, Daryl.
Thanks, Gene.
Now, our theme this time is cross-cultural ramifications of coaching. What are we talking about here today?
Well, we've had just some great themes, great conversations about the future of business coaching. That's the name of this format here. And we've covered things from AI and artificial intelligence coming in. We've covered things from, what are the focuses of coaching? Is it an internal thing? Is it an external thing? And just so if people are coming into this right now, I'd really encourage them to go back, catch up on the past themes. What I was interested in is where are people speaking from about all of this experience and all this knowledge? Where are these experts coming from? Is this a universal? Is everything that's been shared so far universal across the globe? Or is it a little different? Now, I'll be honest with you. I just had a client go on with a major Japanese car manufacturer, and he left a major technology company here in the U.S. He's been coaching with me. I wondered, what's that culture going to be like that he's stepping in? Is it as open and receptive for business coaching, executive coaching, as perhaps cultures here may be? And even in the U.S., there's a lot of old hierarchical structures that coaching is shakes things up a little bit too much for them. So I just wanted to see how it ferrets out across the globe.
So, Daryl, who were the thought leaders that led this panel discussion?
There were so many that jumped in. There's always a few that'll pop up out of the most activity that we want to acknowledge. But the experts here that we're working with come from, I wanted to actually see how much of their experience was actually global, how much of it was focused here in the U.S. So we have people here that are based out of the UK, people who've worked in Scandinavia, people who've worked in Asian cultures, people who've worked, across the globe. They've worked at the senior executive levels. They've worked with manager levels on down. So it's just a really great mix of experts. It's a real privilege to facilitate and watch their interaction.
So, Daryl, as we look at the summary here, it looks like coaching is global, but style is very much regional. Is that right?
Yeah, I wanted to first see, are all cultures, organizations coming out of all cultures, are they all open to coaching in the same way? And a lot of what the experts had to say was, people are people. To whatever degree you get out into the world, I think that's one of the best things all of us can do is travel a lot more. But, you get to see that people are people underneath. They all seek improvement. They're all looking to be the best versions of themselves. And based on regional differences, mindsets, which we could enumerate a ton of those right now off the tip of our tongue, but the way the coaching is offered, the way it's communicated may need to be tailored, to fit that. And I call it being responsible for the listening. In other words, there's a particular listening based on your cultural mindset that you bring to things, and to, as a coach, being responsible for the listening that you're speaking into makes a difference.
So getting into key point number one, looks like regionalism or cultural difference really does matter if you want to be a global coach, right?
Exactly. And David pointed out something. David's always really great. He has a lot of power in few little words. But he was pointing out that, in the more machismo environment, like there are parts of the world and there are certain cultures, and, that's where the machismo aspect is strong, and especially in organizational environment, then you're going to see less coaching or receptivity to coaching, or it'll have to be offered in a different way, because like he says here, it wouldn't be cool to look like you need a helping hand, right? If you're operating from, I got this. And Don was really pointed in showing some real diverse ways that we have to approach coaching from the Asian perspective, or he calls it the traditional Eastern cultures. And I love how he puts it in quotes, traditional and progressive, because
well, yeah.
in a lot of ways, though, he actually points out that we're not so progressive. And it's actually in these Eastern cultures where the coaching is kind of built in, and it's an internal thing, and it's a handed down thing. Whereas here in the West, he calls it, more of a self-serving, self-indulgent, attitudes that we have the external coaches coming in and offering this versus it being part of the embedded culture.
Well, gosh, Daryl, you talk about this regionalism from a global standpoint, but even from a national standpoint, if you're doing business with somebody in the deep South, that's going to be very different from somebody who's very up in the Northeast or very much a liberal on the West Coast. I mean, it's all going to be very different in how you deal with people, and that's just in our one country, right?
Well, it is, and I think it was either Patrick Hens or Alan Arnett that really said, look, you've got different cultures around the world, but within specific regional cultures, you have specific cultures within communities. You have specific cultures within different organizations, within different departments. So it's kind of like there's all these cultural things to take into account, even, in one little region. So again, it's kind of interesting to look, though, at how do you then address, and again, some of the themes that came out here is, look, people are people, but being aware of the culture that you're speaking into will impact how the coaching is received and how it's implemented.
Very good points here. As we go into key point number 2, I guess you're saying, yeah, we're different, but, we're also the same.
Yeah, Brendan was talking about, he's working with an organization now where he's dealing with PhDs, scientists from all over the world. And, he's just talking about what he's learned from being exposed and being a coach in an environment where you're dealing with such diversity. And basically is just saying the commonalities are always going to outweigh the difference. Alan right here was even saying that they ran some programs across the world, 16,000 leaders. He says same content, same program, it worked everywhere. Now, again, I don't know at what level. Yeah, I don't know at what level or, they were impacting. But in other words, someone else mentions in these points here too is that, you want to stick with the same message. It is a sign of respect to offer the same message globally within an organization. And yet how you speak it may need to be altered.
So getting into key point number 3, you talk about the coaching differences. Tell us more about what this means.
Well, this is what I was just basically speaking there is that, if you look at, this is where Patrick mentions what I was just saying, is that everybody around the world can follow the guidelines and the processes. It's a sign of respect if you give the same message, but the wording has to be locally adapted. So again, we come from the point of view that people are people. How do you respect the people of a particular culture or a particular mindset in speaking it in a way that they can incorporate it? Alan, again, was basically saying, hey, that's the way it is. We manage things differently, but the principle of coaching is getting in there to help people make sense of their own lives. Everybody's going to be in the same position, especially at these senior executive levels where they're beyond the nose to the grindstone as much. I mean, not like they're not busy and have a lot to do, but in other words, they're more responsible to hold the bigger picture. And that's where making sense of it all, a coach gets in to make that difference.
So, Daryl, we're talking about in real estate, I think we all know location, location, location. But how does key point number 4 relate to this in terms of coaching?
Well, it's interesting. Lena kind of came into the conversation a little bit later after I'd put up my main key takeaways, but she specifically spoke to the main thing I wanted to sort out in this theme was, what are specific differences? And so she's talking about, in some of the Eastern cultures for herself, she found that they took a little bit longer to build trust. And therefore, it wasn't coaching at the level beyond more guidance and training. And again, it may be because of the culture in which they grow up, how they treat advice, how they treat authority, don't know. She even talks about in Southern Europe that she found, and we go back to what someone had mentioned earlier about the machismo, what David talked about as far as the machismo cultures, that in certain male-dominated arenas, men didn't seem to want to be vulnerable. And again, for coaching to really make its impact, the vulnerability, the openness to be willing to see where one's at and be willing and interested in growing to the greater version of oneself, that's going to be real coaching versus guidance and training. So I really love that she brought up these specific points.
Well, Daryl, so many great contributors in this conversation. Tell us about the three that really stood out for you.
You know, this is the usual suspects. These gentlemen just jump in always right off the front. They kind of set the key takeaways almost, because it's after a week that we've been having these discussions that I start pulling out the themes that are starting to show up. And these gentlemen are always jumping in right away and interacting with each other. It's a real great forum to watch. I just really encourage people to watch it throughout the week, not wait until we have our summaries. But again, there's always the others that are jumping in as well. Lots of just great interactions, great contributors.
Gosh, just a great job facilitating this, Daryl. Thank you so much. Look forward to our next conversation. It's Daryl W. Gurney. He's an executive and a career coach. He's an author, a speaker, a licensed spiritual counselor, and he's an entrepreneur as founder of CareerGuide.com and theback40.com. And I look forward to our next conversation, Daryl.
Always a pleasure, Gene. Thanks.